everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the 5 Minutes or Less Daily Marketing Podcast. My name is Casey Bonebreak, and I'm here with Jacob Smith and also special guest. Hey, Drew. How are you? How's it going?
Hey, doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So you are the founder and CEO of Fark.com. How about you give us a little bit of an intro on you? Tell the audience.
Yeah, so I started the company back in 1999, so it's been around for 21 years. And it's pretty much like what if you crossed the Daily Show with the Drudge Report. It was the original inspiration for Reddit. They've gone on record saying that. We actually tried voting on our site, but since we're comedy-based, it doesn't work. The only thing everybody likes that's funny is cats and puns. So we had to go a different direction.
Well, we are very excited to have you here and have someone who is actually, it's funny because Fark.com is almost as old as we are. I was born in 98, 99. So yeah, it's really interesting to have you on. So the first thing that we want to do is have this little lightning round. So it's just going to be 6 quick questions where we can learn a little bit more about you and hear your interesting takes. So let's get this started. Question number 1, if you could wedgie any historical figure, who would you pick?
Probably Adolf Hitler.
Perfect answer.
He deserves it.
Question number 2, what's your dream travel destination?
Boy, that's a good question. Honestly, I could go anywhere with a pool, so probably like an Airbnb about an hour away. So
beautiful.
I love it.
Question number 3, if you could only speak one word today, what would you say?
Is WTF a word?
We'll go with it.
Question number 4, what's in your fridge right now?
Pretty much beer and leftovers and mustard, I think. Not a lot of mustard, just normal amount.
Question number 5, if you could trade lives with someone, who would it be?
Boy, I don't know about the answer to that one. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't really want to trade lives with anybody. I think I'm doing pretty good on my own. Trying to think who looks like they're having a good time. The Dalai Lama seems to be a pretty happy dude. That might be a good one.
Beautiful. And then question number 6, are you a morning person or a night person?
So I've been trying for my entire life to be a night person because I prefer that, but I'm not. I'm genetically a morning person. I get up with the sun, and I've decided to quit fighting it. I can't. So I don't want to be a morning person, but I am.
Oh, it's a good habit.
Yeah, doesn't hurt.
Right. So now we're going to kind of get into the questions, and you're going to have a minute to answer each of them. There's a little timer in the corner. So what I'm going to ask now is, are you ready?
Sure.
All right. So you said you started Fark.com in 99. So that means that you witnessed the switch from Web 1.0 to Web 2.0. So how has building a brand online changed since the early days of the internet?
Yeah, so early 1999 was pre-Google, and search engines didn't work all that well back then. SEO wasn't even a known thing, which has a lot to do with the way that the layout is currently, because it was built in a time where that wasn't a consideration. So, it was straight up word of mouth. That was literally it. There was nothing else you could do. Even if you got coverage on news media, which we got a bunch, it wasn't enough to move the needle. We got lucky though. I became a guest on a weekly online video casts, because believe it or not, those things actually existed back then. I'm kind of surprised actually, but it was on a network called Tech TV, and it was on a show called The Screensavers, and every week we did that, we get a little bit of a bump, and it did it for 2 or 3 years, and that probably is what got us going, was just that. But it was a long, slow burn, so it was an interesting work. I actually prefer it. It's not easy to do it that way, but I think it's the best because then you own your own engagement channel.
Yes, exactly. I totally agree with that. All right.
Yeah, so Fark.com is extremely dependent on advertising revenue. But since the pandemic hit, I noticed that ad revenue was down just across the board. How has Fark.com changed its model and adapted to weather the pandemic?
So an interesting advantage of being around for 20 years is this is our 3rd recession that we've gone through. And they were all pretty bad, actually. The dot-com crash, the first one was bad, but I wasn't a going business at that point, so it didn't matter. The second one in 2008 sucked a lot. This one is about as bad from an advertising perspective. But what we did the last time, and we're doing it this time as well, is when advertising revenue goes away, you switch to subscriptions. The big difference being advertising is such an incredible, unnecessarily pain in the ass that I don't know that I'm going to switch back. I mean, we're going to probably keep having ads, but I think the subscription model is pretty much where it's at. I'm kind of done with advertising, so we're probably just going to stick on this for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, that's definitely a smarter path, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's harder, but it pays dividends.
Okay, so since Fark.com has been your life for the last 21 years, you've obviously had a lot of experience running a successful monetized website. So the third question is, what advice do you have for blogs and individuals trying to monetize their websites?
Well, if the advertising market ever comes back, then that's probably a viable route. But at the end of the day, I think a subscription model is absolutely the way to go. In fact, I've been experimenting with Twitch for a little while, and basically the upshot is that they do a subscription model, and I really like the way that goes. So I would recommend, if you're going to do something like that, like use a platform like Twitch where you get some kind of a guaranteed payout. That notwithstanding, I think the better way to go is always own your own engagement channel. You need to train your readers and your audience to come to you. And the reason why is because platforms are capricious. They can change the rules at a moment's notice. Google notoriously did this in 2011, I think it was. And it wasn't a bad change. There was an entire ecosystem that grew up around basically content farms. And Google said, you know what? Okay, we don't want this. And anybody that hung their hat on that mess, that was extinguished immediately. And so beware of platforms, own your own channel. Subscription is the way to go.
Right on time. All right. So we have limited time, obviously. So that was the end of the questions. But why don't you go ahead and give yourself and the audience a shameless plug. Tell us anything you want to talk about.
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier, and this actually gave me the idea for this, that I knew at some point Fark would be around long enough to where people, it would be older than people I was talking to. And I actually got this because in 2006, I walked into the newsroom at the Washington Post, and all of a sudden there was only one person older than me, and I was like, oh my God, when did this happen? That was a first. Here's my shameless plug, is basically one of the things that we never did on Fark was we never did algorithmic programming of the newsfeed. It's a list of all the fun stuff that's going on during the day, plus the important stuff in the news. And I think that it's more important to get a non-algorithmic view of it, because getting the algorithms, what the algorithm thinks you want, it's more or less right, but it isn't what you need. Like, you know what I want to eat for dinner? Doritos. You know what I shouldn't eat for dinner? Doritos. I should get some vegetables and some meat in there. And so we try to make it fun. We try to take the stuff that's boring and make it interesting. And I'm kind of curious and I want to hear from people who have not heard of it before, who go check it out. What do they think of that experience? Because everybody my age lived in a world where that didn't exist, and then now they're in the algorithmic bubble. I'd like to hear from people who were born in the algorithmic bubble, who come out. And I want to hear whether or not they find that a preferential experience or not, because I'm hearing some people prefer it, and I'd like to know more about that if that's possible. So let me know.
Well, it's really interesting because when we were exploring Fark ourselves and being part of that algorithmic bubble generation, I guess, it was something unlike anything that I've ever seen on the internet. And Casey's first comment was, "This looks like Reddit," but it's not.
Yeah,
so,
not an accident. It's like Reddit, but edited. Part of the problem we had with the voting process was I said it from the comedy perspective. I didn't like what people picked, but it's the same problem over there too. It's like, I think an edited process would be a way better experience. But obviously I'm biased because that's what I do.
I love it. It's very funny. So if anybody who's listening to this, you hear this and you don't know of Fark.com, please go check it out.
All right, y'all, that's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you for sticking with us and tuning in. Real quick, if you liked today's episode, we'd love it if you sub to the podcast wherever you're listening to it, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. To get in touch with us and find more content, you can visit our website, which is nestled right there in the show notes. Have a great day, y'all. And as always, good luck and good marketing.